In this video, we have several demonstrations that are going to be placed together just to share a few techniques that are not going to be covered in detail, but they are great techniques to know. And they're a part of your knitting once you become a little more advanced, but also that you will use along the way. The first thing that we're going to talk about is reading your work. Before you write down is the sample dishcloth that you will make as a part of this course. As you look at the dishcloth, there's actually several different stitch combinations that are being shown. In the center of the dishcloth is what's called seed stitch. It's an alternation between the knit stitch and the purl stitch, and it continues here for a few rows. In these spaces on top and on bottom of that seed stitch, you have what is called stockinette stitch, or some people call it stocking stitch. And with the stockinette stitch, you have knit on one side where you have, it's very smooth, and you know the knit stitch because you see the prominence of the V's that are created with the knit stitch. But when you look on the back side of the stitch, it has the humps that are created by the purl stitch. So when you're knitting the stockinette stitch in a flat piece, you knit one row and you purl one row. And your knit side is what's considered your right side. Or another way of thinking about it is the side of your work which will face the public. And that's because of the smooth detail is what you want to show on the outside of your work. The outside trimming of this piece is done in what's called garter stitch. And that stitch is done with all knit stitches on both the right side, which is the side that faces the public, as well as the wrong side, which is the back side of your work. And so you notice the difference between the stockinette stitch, which has this smooth surface, and the garter stitch, because the garter stitch makes what seems like ridges here, and in between you have the smoothness of the knit stitches and you have the texture which is created by the purl stitches. So when you're working on those combination stitches, you'll see some of the differences in which visual depiction you prefer. But additionally, you will have an opportunity to learn what's the difference between your right side, which is the side that faces you, it faces the outside, it faces the public, or the wrong side. And you can see here, because of that stockinette stitch, pretty clearly what's the difference between that front side and the right side and the wrong side, and front side and back side. And so that is just a little bit on reading your stitches. You'll know the difference between the knit stitch because it forms that V, which is the meeting of the pieces of your yarn, and it forms that V shape, which you'll see here. And then the purl stitches, when you're reading your work, it creates that little hump. And as you go along, much like in the seed stitch area, you can see where the knit stitches are somewhat smooth and the purl stitches cause that hump. And so that will help you as you go through the process of reading your knit work. In this segment, we're going to learn how to change colors. I'm going to finish this row, and you will need this technique for one of two primary reasons. I mean, there are many others, but one would be if you have run out of yarn and you need to add a new skein of yarn to your project. Another reason for using this technique is if you want to change colors. And so for this, I'm just going to do the basic method of changing your yarn color. So I'm at the end of this row. I'm going to turn my work, and I'm going to start the new color at the beginning of this new row. For this demonstration, I'm going to change the color to black so that you'll see what I'm doing. Going to cut off my old yarn. I will put my stitches in my left hand, and you do not have to do this at the beginning of a row. If you were doing any type of color work, you would actually just do it as is, or where the pattern would designate. So what you're going to do is go into the stitch to complete the stitch as required by your pattern. For this pattern, I'm doing all knit stitches. So I'm going to insert my needle in order to do the knit stitch. And then I'm going to grab the new skein of yarn and I'm going to place it over the needle as if doing the knit stitch, because that's what we're doing. And I'm going to go over. Now, I usually try to have a nice size tail and go ahead and bring it forward. And that first stitch is going to be extremely loose, but we'll be able to tighten it up later once we come back through and finish it off. And let's do a few more stitches. Now what I do when I get to that second stitch, I will insert it as usual, and I will bring both the tail as well as that new, the working yarn over in a knit stitch. And it will bring two pieces of string forward. But what this is allowing us to do is actually work the yarn into the tail into our project as we knit. I'm going to do it again. Another knit stitch with both the tail and the working end. And then I'm going to do it one more time. Both the tail and the working end. And once I've done 3 or 4 stitches, here I've done 3, I will let the tail go. And I will continue working with my working yarn only. And for my pattern again, it's just the knit stitch. So I'm going to knit a few more stitches. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go all the way across the row in the black. And I'm going to go to the end and I'm going to go all the way back. And I'm going to meet you back when I get to those 3 stitches where we had both the working yarn as well as the tail end worked together. I'll see you back in just a moment. I am nearing the end of the first row with the new color, so I'm going to work my way to those stitches. Now, when you use this technique for changing colors, you just have to remember when you work that tail and working yarn together, those few stitches will have 2 pieces of yarn and you need to work those 2 together as if they were one. So when I insert my needle through this stitch, I'm going to insert it through both of those at the same time. There's one. And I'm going to actually give it a little pull because that was the last one. And I have 2 more that I'll need to work off. One, here's another one. Here's the last one. And now I have 1 stitch left. Now you have successfully changed your yarn, and we will talk about how to handle your ends, your tail ends that are left on your project when we work through completing and finishing your project.